quorum's 4, right?
No, quorum is just a majority to have the meeting.
Would be
3, you just need 3 to have a meeting. I have the bylaws here.
And then I was thinking about that, so I couldn't find any provision on the minutes either, except for that if you did meet in the quarter, which would be, essentially a 3-month, then you could have the officers can approve it. But if we just met to just approve minutes, then there shouldn't be any minutes for the next meeting. So you wouldn't have to, that wouldn't be a ongoing, right? So you wouldn't then have any minutes for the next month because all of this is gonna say you approved the minutes for the previous month and then you approve those minutes for that you approved. I mean, it just seems like an interesting perpetual kind of weird spiral. So if you had no discussion items and no hearing items, and all you're doing is approving minutes, I don't see why that would constitute a meeting of the next month.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so I did talk to our attorney about that. One of my questions, just could minutes be approved by remotely? And he said there had to be a meeting, even if it was just a meeting on that, because anytime you do public business, which would include the minutes, someone might have an objection and say, no, that's not what minutes do. I know. It has to be accessible to the public. We did say that you could set up a Zoom meeting just to approve minutes. Anyone can come.
I'd like that too.
But then that would have been a meeting to approve minutes, so I suppose there would just be very brief minutes that, the Matt had a quorum, adopted the minutes, adjourned. And that would make it easy on Katie, because it would be like.
It just seems kind of, I mean, I don't have a problem, and I know that we would have to, meet, set up, chair from here. Everybody could just be Zoom and then do it and then be done in 5 minutes. I mean, I guess that would be a way of keeping it sort of, I wouldn't have a problem with that personally.
So it's, I don't know, I guess let me just say, okay, we'll see. We may or may not get a quorum. Rex said he was coming, I think, right? And he usually attends remotely.
Yeah.
He's in Estes.
Coming in person.
No, usually remotely.
These are the minutes, there's the agenda right at the end of the,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Printed some up. Thanks.
And then Steve Steinbecker at the last minute said he was out of town visiting friends and could he join by phone. But you can join on your smartphone via Zoom if you wanted to call in.
Yeah, so either Rex, me, or Steve.
Morning, everyone. I'm joined by Zoom as well today.
Good morning. Morning, Jordan.
If we don't get a quorum, we can't have an official meeting, but all that means is we can't approve the minutes, but we can still discuss. I don't think there's anything that says we can't talk about since we're here.
Yeah.
Let's just see if there's anything else from Steve, or Steve maybe emailed you. Maybe just see if.
Left the office without the phone, so
Okay.
it's becoming that habit.
We can't do that anymore because now we have two-step Google login. We're supposed to use our phones.
Oh,
So if
yes, so
don't
you
bring your
have to,
phone,
yes, so now you're totally toast.
Can't log in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, I know it's important, but it still is. I've forgotten my phone too. I feel lost all day.
It's like, I just can't find it. Well, it was like, and I just got out of the truck and I'm like, well, where is it? And I'm like, oh, I know where it is, sitting on my desk. Well, this is an hour meeting, it'll be a pass, so I'll do it later. Yeah. Well, I guess what if we just went ahead and got started and then we could kind of move our agenda around. If we get them to show up, then we can be voting otherwise we'll just do discussions.
I got an email from Steve saying, sorry, can Katie forward me the call-in phone number? So is that on the Zoom invite, the phone number?
It is.
And we'd have a quorum, which should be good.
Yeah, and Rex usually is always right.
I for sure Rex. So.
Yeah, the big bachelor party was there. Was Nickel. His next door neighbor or whatever.
He often talks about the hot tub parties
Yeah.
at the short-term rental next door. Maybe they finally got started. They invited Rex to come.
That's good.
Short-term rental with a hot tub, that's even, short-term rental's one thing.
Yeah, that's in his backyard, the next lot over it, so he's really, And he said this isn't a normal hot tub, this is like a
Oh, 10 seaters.
8-person party tub, it's like a regular pool.
The thrown-in option.
Ironic Steve's not here. I don't know if you guys know, but it became somewhat of a joke between Steve and me about bagels. Because our kids were both in the same Boy Scout troop back in the day. I don't know, we just started having a running joke about bagels. When I got up to join the board of bagels, I said, look, I was working bagels at home next weekend. And I ran into him once, he gives bagels. Then if we don't have any, he's always texts me about, hey, where are the bagels?
Yeah.
So Kitty brought bagels this time. And Steve's not here.
Well, I'm enjoying them.
Throw some in the freezer for next week.
Yeah, we'll put them out and, staff will eat it before.
Staff will.
Yeah.
My mom lives near Rosenberg's Bagels in Denver, and they have you had their bagels, they're so. Yeah, Rosenberg's, there's a few locations now. There's one like at the Stanley Marketplace, and then there's one like kind of in, there's one in Five. I mean,
Try those. Gibbs is the best in town.
Yeah, I daughter lived at Gibbs for a couple of years in high school, so I got used to all our laundry smelling like everything. She would come home and dump her clothes in a pile.
No matter how they wrap it, you still
Oh, yeah.
get the scent.
Yeah.
My car will smell like it pretty.
I love
good.
that though, that's my favorite.
There are
That could be
definitely
colloquial.
worse scents.
Rosenberg's has the white fish salad too, which I really love on the bagels.
Could I also ask a favor? I'm looking for the agenda again and I can't seem to pull it up. If someone could, is there someone who could quickly send me the agenda again? Thank you.
I pulled it off the website.
And actually, it's pretty abbreviated. We, the formalities, search for a quorum, any personal meetings if someone's here that wants to address the board, then we look at the minutes of the prior 2 meetings because we got a little behind. And then really the whole agenda was just to have an open discussion between the commissioners and the Board of Appeals about the role of the board and what it does and what it could do, which was something the board was interested in. And it was kind of a follow-up from the 5-year review the commissioners did of all the boards and commissions last year.
I just take a picture of it, Jody, and text it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens, as you know, my internet is not the best out where I live, but I'll be seeing you shortly for our executive session. I'm just trying to get a lot done so I can have a life on starting on Friday. So thanks.
Why, what is that?
So I don't know, maybe you're right, if Steve's not here, we do that.
Just got some from Steve.
Oh, okay. Just discuss, and if we get a quorum, we can.
Yeah. Clock is ticking.
Looks like there's an email from Steve looking for the call-in phone number.
Sent him the call-in number and bolded the meeting ID. Hopefully you'll see that.
We're going to get started, I guess, and then shift the items around, and if Steve can get on, then we can do the voting. If not, we'll just do the discussion items. Spend too much time here. But while Steve tries to look for that, and hopefully Rex will pick up or something. But anyways, I guess we'll just call over personal appearances. So got extra people here today. I guess we'll just start with introductions. I'm Paul Bigman, and then I'll start with you, Clint.
And Clint Hanna coming in on Zoom from up in the mountains.
Well, as the chair of our board, and I'm here to free the building official, so the board exists to keep a check on my absolute power.
That's right. So super important then. I'm Kristen Stevens, Larimer County Commissioner, glad to be here and see what you all do and talk over your board. So thanks for having us this morning and thanks for the bagels.
Okay, we have Katie, Vince, and then you want to say?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Leslie Ellis, Director. Good morning.
All right.
Morning.
And then Jody.
Skipped out, but or she may be having internet problems.
Yeah.
But Commissioner Shannon McNally is also with us by Zoom.
Okay. All right. So since we don't have a quorum, we won't do the minutes. We'll come back to that. Get the other members present. So yeah, I guess we'll just jump to discussion items. Board of Appeals role and responsibilities. And I think you had
I had a short staff report if you want me to set the table.
yeah.
So last year, the Board of County Commissioners looked at the role of the Board of Appeals as it did all the boards and commissions. And Board of Appeals is one of, I think, just 2 or 3 statutory boards the county has, which is to say there's a definition in state law for what the board does. It does a couple things. The Board of Appeals exists to hear appeals of determinations of my decisions or decisions of my staff. So it could be inspection decisions or plan review decisions or contractor licensing decisions or notices and orders that are issued under the property maintenance code. So that's a core function. And the way it works in Larimer County is they can appeal my decision. Oh, it must be Steve or something. Or Rex. If they could appeal my decisions to the board, and then that's the last administrative choice. After that, they could, seek relief through the courts. We get very few appeals of my decisions, I think largely because we approve a fair number of, I approve code modifications or alternate means and methods. We try to be flexible and not just tell people no. And also my staff knows to have a good reason for decisions they make. It has to be, founded in building code or state law or something like that. So I think since I've been building official for 10 years, I think we've had 2 appeals maybe. One contractor appeal and one code appeal where they had to put a sprinkler. They did not feel that they should have put a sprinkler. So other than that, the state law also says that they call this a board of review. And when there are building codes to be considered, then the Board of Appeals helps review those codes, which our board does. We don't have it just go to the Board of Appeals. As I think we have a code review committee that includes members of the Board of Appeals, contractors, engineers, architects. This year we did it with the city of Fort Collins. It spent a lot of time last year and early this year going over the 2021 and all the amendments, and the board made some recommendations. So they fulfill that function. But other than that, there's no defined function for the board. And so sometimes the board has nothing to do. When it's not a code year, which is every 3 years, if there's no building appeal, the board might not meet for 3 months or 6 months, or might not need to meet at all, although every year on or after July 1st, they're supposed to choose officers for, chair, co-chair, or vice chair. So there was some talk among the board members about could the board have an expanded role? What else could it do? That came from the board itself, and they've been talking about maybe it could be more of a technical advisory committee to help the building division look at functioning or things like that. So that's the discussion on the role of the board. The other thing I would add is that when we did the 5-year review, there were a series of questions from the board, including, did the board have enough work to do? Was its workload too much or too little? Did the board have the appropriate scope of authority, which we've been talking about? And also, did they feel like their communications with the Board of Commissioners was sufficient? And we haven't had much, I have obviously contact with the Board of Commissioners on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, but I don't think any of the board members have. So they felt, it would be good at least maybe once a year to have some or all the commissioners come just to chat about whatever, maybe things that are coming up or specific topics. And so that idea came up, fit in really well with this idea of looking at the role of the board, and that's kind of why we have this meeting and invited all the commissioners. And we're glad too you were able to come, and I'm sure Commissioner Gonzalez has other appointments and things. So that's all I want to say. Then maybe you and Clint could say, and you guys.
I think that was it. And what we were looking at was within this last review, this is the code review cycle that we really spent. Usually takes almost about a year, right?
Yeah.
Running through what the new code was, what the changes are. And they're getting so complex and intertwined with kind of where zoning is, where land use kind of falls. And then as we move into the climate action plan and those agendas and what's kind of going on there, that really kind of comes back into, okay, well, how much of that is land use? How much is that zoning? How much is that code? Where does that fall? And then there's a lot of discussion. So that was where it was like, when this was all kind of really set up, it was primarily just an appeals board with the plan review sort of as an ad. Yeah, it makes sense. And it just seems like, do we need to do more plan review or more technical advising? Because the board is really a technical board. It's based with people who are in the industry who understand. So we have engineers, on energy, Clint's an electrician, and then we have architect. And then, Rex is a retired engineer, planner, and he works a lot with the land use and some of that. So like, what was short-term rental? What's, the small house or those kind of things or whatever that kind of fall into, does it apply to us? Does it not apply to us type of thing or whatever? So that's really where it was kind of that question is like, as we really move into this complex environment, is there something else that we really need to be sort of, does there need to be any real kind of change? And then after further review, I think we decided that we already kind of fall into that. It's just more of a application in what we do there. And I guess that would be then sort of my question back to the commissioners and you guys, and that is that as you're looking at moving forward with everything, what do you want to see from us? Like how would we be able to assist you in being able to make those better decisions, either via the climate action plan or some of the land use, type of things or whatever. So we ran into that real big issue with like City of Fort Collins was wanting to require charging stations, which really isn't in and of itself a building code issue. Now, how that gets applied becomes building code, but putting that in, it was really kind of like, this is more of a land use kind of thing, or a zoning. So that's really kind of where that question kind of comes in. And direction from us or to us would be, how much more do you want us to be involved in those being able to give you the information you need to make informed decisions?
I mean, yeah, and I don't know if Clint or anyone else wants to add to that. I'll just say really briefly that I think that it would be smart for us to take advantage of your expertise, especially when you're offering it. And I think that we will need that kind of expertise as we're going forward with the climate action plan. And so I think, so yes, so thank you for the offer. And, I don't know where the best place to plug in with that is. And I think about when we were talking about energy efficiency in buildings, when we were developing the code, and I think, some of the questions I was asking Eric is like, how can we get to heat pumps? Are we going to get to that place where we're not even going to be, and can the grid handle that? And is that a good idea? And because I heard that Quebec or Quebec City or somewhere is going, like, anything new that's built has to not use fossil fuels for heating. And even places that are built that are getting a new furnace in the next 3 years will have to go to that. So kind of where we are in that landscape of what we can initiate. I mean, I think affordability does come into play with some of these questions, because I just was listening to NPR on the way here, and it was like, here's people in affordable housing who are saying, we live in, we want something energy efficient, but we want something inexpensive. I mean, sometimes those are mutually exclusive, and so I do think that there's a lot of work to be done on the climate action plan. We're hoping to get this $400,000 FEMA grant so we can really implement some of this stuff. So yes, and I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think that we would like to help us.
Yeah, I think during our discussions during the code adoption process and reviewing all the additional requirements for the climate series and efficiencies and all that, there was a lot of discussion on how to apply that stuff and how it made sense in the practicality portion of things during construction, cost, availability of components, just the whole structure of everything, trying to put it all together and see what has to happen now, what should happen now, and what things should wait a little while until technology or availability catches up.
And Steve, is that you?
Yes, I'm on. Just
Okay.
listening.
So we now have a quorum, which is great. Okay.
I think that was Clint that was speaking.
Yep, I
Yes.
was.
Yeah, this is Steve Stein. Sorry, I introduced myself. I came on a little bit late trying to get my codes in line for the meeting. Sorry I can't attend. I'm up in beautiful Estes Park with some family. So sorry I didn't make it with y'all. So anyways, just a quick comment. I think the technical side of things is a very important one. I know Clint's been a great asset to the committee, when we were talking about some of the code issues related to cost of putting in 40 amp circuits, 50 amp circuits for, EVs and different things like that. What was the relative cost? And just back to the cost and affordability real quick. I mean, Habitat for Humanity, not pushing them, but they've always had that focus. It's got to be affordable, but it's also got to be affordable to be able to maintain it and pay utility bills. So it's that fine line of balancing, environment and health and indoor air quality, as well as energy consumption. So the first task always is to reduce consumption, and then so design the best possible envelope and package you can. And obviously then the equipment side comes into that, and that's where people like Clint can add their value. So yeah, I think the offer stands. We've got some qualified people, and maybe we can find somebody better than all of our team, but how can we assist you going forward to make it a practical, maybe more, we do more of the research, fact finding and interpretation for you on what's available, and then you helps you to render your decisions.
So I think, when I look at the bylaws of the board, I don't think it's exclusive. I think it's more inclusive. It lists 3 things that the board does. One is to hear site appeals of decisions I make. One is to be a board of review for new building codes, and the third is to hear and decide appeals of contractor licenses. If we felt it was necessary, we could add a D, other related topics as, related to building and construction, the built environment. I don't know if we need to. I don't think the bylaws say that that's all the board can do. I mean, that's what the board has to do, but I think it can discuss anything else it wants on similar vein.
Well, and when we looked at it through, the plan review or the building review was referencing the state statute, which essentially was for 5 members with the voting rights. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't bring others in and do the consulting. It's just they wouldn't necessarily have voting rights. So that was where it was just more of an application. We can easily add that with that discussion point if we felt we needed more input during that review process or whatever. But then the actual direct link, maybe from council to this board, would be only those voting members. And so there was a little bit of discussion that we found that it would fit without having to change anything. it's mostly just application or how we would actually just do things. That's certainly a change.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about, could we have non-voting members on the board? And I think we probably have to change the bylaws for that to add non-voting members or, but you could also just invite people to come. And there was some discussion of trying to get a permanent rep from the Home Builders Association and from the fire departments and stuff to come. Which I think they would come if there was something to discuss, you know, they wouldn't come if we were just having one of those meetings where there's very little on the agenda.
You mentioned too, potentially providing feedback or information about operations in the department. I mean, because you all engage as customers or work with the community that works with us as customers through our process, and I'm curious about your thoughts on how you could engage that way too, because that could be helpful.
Sure, and that makes sense, because I think that that's where we hear it from the contractor side, going through the zoning, going through the plan review, going through the permit process. And so we could sort of bring in another thing. I mean, you just are going through it, so Clint, so kind of has a little bit of firsthand deal with that process too. But yeah, we can definitely bring that in and invite.
Oh, and Steve as well. Steve
Yeah.
is, I don't know if you've met him before, he's a local architect, so he's works in the city, but also has a fair number of customers who go through county building permitting and zoning processes.
Is there any expertise you feel like you're missing? Like you talked about fire authority and maybe somebody from local. Is there any other areas that you feel like you want to have some kind of ex officio member that could help? Or would it be just for like if we're looking at some of these particular issues?
I think right now we're lacking the engineer aspect. Was Wayne didn't jump in today either, but we have that. I think the only other ones maybe.
Yeah, well, Wayne Thompson's an engineer with CTL Thompson, and his term's expiring, and he didn't reapply, so. If you remember, we only had, Paul reapplied, and I guess all the applications have been slow because I guess Austin's leaving or something.
Yeah.
So we definitely want an engineer on the board for sure. I don't know, I think you can get maybe too specific. I think in Estes Park, for instance, they're pretty set up where they have a plumber and an electrician and a residential builder and a commercial builder. And bylaws don't require that, it just requires people with expertise. So we're looking for architects, engineers, contractors, things like that. So, but we don't have a plumber on the board. I'm not sure a lot of plumbing issues come up. There's been more electrical because of, as you mentioned, the push to electrify everything and get away from natural gas.
Well, part of that too is that the county just took on electric.
Right.
And so plumbing's still state, state code, even though electrical's still state, but county's now taking those inspections. And so we felt that with that, that's one reason why Clint was the real asset of what we needed, was if there was appeals based upon electrical issues on the inspection side. Now, the county took that inspection, that was where we filled that hole.
So I was just reading through the bylaws, and I think that if you're going to add some extra duties, that we should kind of be specific. I just reviewed all of those. And if you're, maybe put in something about quarterly meetings regarding discussions on review of processes or review of this climate plan. I'm not sure, just to kind of spell it out so that it's in there. I see they were just updated and approved in 2020. So maybe some suggestions for reviewing what you think you need to add. And if you're going to invite other members to come but non-voting, I think that's, I'd see that in there, but maybe it should be more specific if you're going to change that makeup. I just got done kind of fine tuning again the behavioral health bylaws, and it really, just a couple of words changed a lot of who could vote and who could do what. And so I just want to kind of caution that if you're going to add some extra discussions or something, maybe just spell out what that role is and what you're being advisory maybe, because then you're talking about coming from a board of review to being advisory. And so you might want to spell that out because that can be confusing, I think, for others who are coming in and seeing, because really I look at it I was reading through it as we're talking, and if you are a Board of Appeals, a Board of Review, and then what some of the things you're talking about is more of an advisory. And so that would change a little bit of the role, and you might want to need to spell that out about that you do that once or twice a year or something like that. And maybe if it's just those couple of times, if staff's okay with that extra staff time to do that work, spell it out, who you invite and who can vote. And if it's not a vote, though, it's just advisory, there may not be a vote, it's just a recommendation or some input. I hope that is helpful. Those are just my thoughts off the top of my head.
Thank you.
And it sounds like at least 2 commissioners would be open to the Board of Appeals proposing changing the bylaws to broaden the scope and spell it out and come back to you. Obviously, I'm not asking for any kind of decision today in Commissioner Cross.
I just feel like we have the expertise with you. Maybe your workload is like, you don't have as many things. I mean, how can we use you to your advantage and our advantage, right? I mean, you don't want to have meetings where you don't have anything to discuss necessarily. We have all these needs with, I think about affordable housing, short-term rentals, climate change, there's a lot of issues that are going to involve, the built environment. So I think that having that kind of expertise is, and especially since you're offering. So, to me, but yeah, I mean, I think changing the bylaws if we need to, and clearly can do that in consultation with our legal team. And it's, could be just even a few sentences that might help with that. But I think moving forward, that would be helpful. And I don't know what Leslie or, Eric, if you think that's a good idea, but I think more hands on deck, and especially if it's work that maybe then your staff doesn't get pulled away from, from your main duties, that also might be valuable.
Well, I'm curious, either you or Commissioner Shedden-Nelly or Leslie might know, with other boards where you refer somebody to that board just for their commentary or their review that isn't like in their core work, how do you do that? I mean, do you have?
Actually, I just want to chime in on that, is that we try to keep the boards in their lanes and in their roles and responsibilities, because we have some boards recently that wanted to kind of go outside of their scope of their advisory. And so we're trying to be very careful to keep everyone in their roles and responsibility and lanes. And so I think that others, we're talking, and I don't know if Kristen, I've talked to you about this, but just to have overall going forward next year, I'm going to suggest that maybe boards and commissions support a work plan to show what they're going to work on for the next year. And that might be helpful for this board. Maybe you guys, suggest what you'd like to have a discussion on, so that we make sure staff don't get overwhelmed with like a lot of extra things that boards and commissions want to kind of add on or change. And saying it's not set in stone, but at least something that we can know what they're all working on, the discussions, because there's over 30 boards and commissions. And as a commissioner, I'm really glad that we divide those up. And I have over 10, I think Kristen has over 10. And we take these responsibilities and these very seriously. And as to echo what Kristen said, we're very grateful for your service. And I think she's correct that we have your subject matter experts, and we're very glad for your service. And of course, we need your input, because we're all not subject matter experts in plumbing or electricians. I have a nephew, sometimes I call him up, he's a master electrician, and he works for a big international corporation. And I say, explain this concept to me. So sometimes it's great to have those folks that are working in, actually, I think he's working in Larimer County sometime right now, but it's nice to have those opportunities to learn from you all and have that scan of our codes and things. And I hear this from some other boards, there's not some work to do. So, but I think that we have to be careful when we talk about what you guys are, by state statute, what you guys are supposed to be here for. So if we're going to add another role or response, I don't know if it's a responsibility. I think it's because you have the responsibility set in state statute from the Colorado, right? But maybe we add another role onto the bylaws of what you are all going to maybe provide once or twice a year, maybe quarterly. I don't know, it's up to you. maybe some suggestions about, and staff too, because we don't want to add to staff work, right? Because they're working, we have a pretty full work plan. But maybe a role is some advisory input on this climate action work that we're doing. Do we need to look at codes or things for short-term rentals? So I think I'm open to exploring this. I agree with my colleague, Commissioner Stevens, and I appreciate being invited to this conversation. I apologize. I'm just trying to do 36 hours of work in a 24-hour day right now. And so I'm trying to limit my travel time of 40 minutes and kind of maximize my work time. So I think we welcome your expertise in this idea. I just think we have to look at have the county attorney and staff show us how we might be able to do this in an innovative way. As we were sitting here talking, I was also Googling some of the other larger counties and how their board of appeal works. And it would be great to learn. But here in Larimer County, sometimes we just do it the Larimer way and find a way that works best for our county. And so I'm open and I'm to what you guys are offering. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to have this discussion. So I hope that's helpful, my comments, but just some thoughts as I'm pulling things up and reading them as we're discussing.
I would chime in and support that. I think my recommendation or direction would be that the board act as an advisory resource for all of you. So if questions came up on plumbing or other obvious, more technical areas, that we could do our research, and we might have to reach out to other experts as well, but at least we can give you our best guess, best opinion. So I think that's the role. I don't think anybody on the board is looking to extend county's liability in any way. So we're not formalizing a yes, no, or voting. And that raises obvious questions on how we got to those decision making. But that's not our role, is to make the decisions. It's to support you, give you all the options and say, here's the pros and cons, here's the costs, benefits, those kinds of things. I would step back briefly to something Paul mentioned, which I think is a pretty important factor for Larimer County as a whole, and you as commissioners, is that we know we've got a complex system in Larimer County. It's large. It's got multiple issues as far as density. We've got urban level development trying to happen in the county. We've got Estes Valley. We've got, smaller areas, fire protection districts being just one big wild card. What can they support in specific areas? But I think that in itself, land use tying to the practicality and interpretation of the code is kind of a really good overlap. Me as an architect, we're in planning positions all the time. We're also having to coordinate with engineers all the time. So it is this complex overlapping of multiple interests and concerns. So that's what I think we could help with, is trying to, sift through some of those issues. And we're here to help. So.
Well, I think even some of the issues that come up at the state level, like there was state legislation on changing building codes in the WUI areas and things like that, where, that's a lot to sift through in a short amount of time. I think that that's valuable to have those kind of, to be able to understand some of those things, because my guess is that while those didn't go through, I don't think this time they will be coming back. And so I feel like there's a lot of areas where you can, provide that, help us with understanding some of these issues, and because it is in our wheelhouse. And to what Commissioner Shanally was saying about, I think that there's a few boards that maybe wanted to create policy themselves instead of advise, and I think that that's just, there's some hesitation about, but I certainly, it sounds like you have no interest in doing that, and sometimes that's not even just a whole board, that's one member on a board that wants to do something like that. I don't think you're proposing anything like that at all. So, and I'm just grateful to have that, because when I look at some of these bills coming through on energy efficiency, like I don't necessarily have the expertise or frankly the time to look through that and say, does that make sense? Is that a good idea? How much is this going to cost us? Is this workable in our county? So I think that, to me, it's like, why wouldn't we use the expertise we have? Because while Commissioner Shattuck McNally may have a master electrician in her family, I do not. And so, and nor should I have to have a friend group that is my expertise. And so, I think that just having people that we trust that are part of our organization is really valuable.
If I could add on, I think the suggestions of being clear in the bylaws, probably broadly, because that may change from year to year. Right now it's climate action, climate smart planning, but 2 years from now, it may be a different focus. So maybe defining that broadly, but then the work plan is something that can help pinpoint, from year to year what you would be focusing on. And that gives an opportunity to check back with the commissioners and say, are these the things that you want input on? And that helps us coordinate, I think. So you might consider doing that. That is something we are trying to do with other boards where their function is both review and also advisory. And on the advisory pieces, we do tend to check with them once a year and just say, what are the things that you're going to be working on this year? And then we want to confirm that those are the things that coordinate with the commissioner's work plan or department work plan, and so that we're not getting too far afield on those different projects. So so that could be a helpful way to just make it clear what you're going to do.
I like that, yeah. You're right, because it won't be climate, well, it won't be climate forever, but I mean, specifically with our plans going forward, it might not always be climate, and there's affordable housing and lots of other, water use kind of
Legislative.
to me, the legislative piece would be really helpful, because I think that in our office, we have our public affairs group that's kind of helped us with sifting through some of this, but I mean, it comes at you fast and furious of what some of that stuff is, and so it was very hard to keep up, and that I think would be really valuable.
Yeah, I agree. If we had some help with the fast and furious, because I know Eric was very involved with our tiny home legislation that got passed, and we just celebrated that, and with our other code enforcers. So both of those bills came out of community development, but planning and development. But I know that he's very busy, and if we had another few eyes, if we had this, there's just a lot of these bills that come forward with good intentions, but maybe unintended consequences, right? Good intentions, we could go on and on about unfunded mandates and unintended consequences. And we just always want to try to make sure we're at the table. If there's a bill coming through and we may not completely agree, we at least can try to amend it or add suggestions. And we're in these meetings, and if we don't understand, we're not experts in this area. So if we had some ideas of how we can make suggestions, because we can't always pull Eric and some of our staff away for meetings, but if we had the opportunity to send some things to you ahead of time and get your expertise on that, I think that's really valuable. So I think this is a great conversation. But I think we'll have to look at the bylaws and make sure we spell that out, and maybe put in there the work plan is submitted about what you're going to talk, and come back and review and all those things. But I think this is a really great idea, and I'm great for the discussion. And if you don't mind, Clint, I'd just like to know where you're camping. I'm assuming you're camping. I'm very jealous.
Well, I'm up at we have a property up in Upper Cherokee Park, and that's where I'm at right now. We have 40 acres up here. I'm building a log home on. I'm waiting for Ron Kriegel right now to come up and inspect our underground plumbing.
Very relevant.
And then our fifth wheel down at the bottom of the property. We have a little campground down here.
Cool. I'm super jealous, just to let you know.
So if you need Commissioner McNally to come, visit your property, I think she's offering.
Hey,
Bring your
I've got
bring your-
Starlink here, so we're doing good.
Bring your fishing rod, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, North Fork of the Pooter isn't far away.
I'm taking fly fishing lessons starting in July. So I'm hoping I don't have to reschedule, but I've got a few. And so I started them in 2020, of course, or 2019, and they stopped. And so I'm looking forward to getting a few. I need that stress release. I hear some staff in our department run up and fish over break or lunch to take a break. So I'm kind of thinking that might be a good idea.
Good deal. Yeah.
Generous lunch break.
So what I'm hearing is
On the hill here.
kind of general support for, suggesting changing the bylaws. Obviously, that gets approved by the board of commissioners, but we would have to draft it to include a fourth point of acting as a technical advisory committee on subjects related to building and codes and things like that. And that can be pretty broad. We've mentioned climate, wildfire. You're right that they didn't mandate a state wildfire code this time. It didn't make it in, but it may come back next year.
It is coming back next year because I'm on that subcommittee and I can tell you it is coming back next year.
So you
It
might wanna
almost-
look at that. The one thing I'm trying to figure out how that would work is, like you mentioned, how fast and furious it is, and that's true. All the bills come up suddenly and they get changed, and the board only meets once a month. So I'm not sure how we get the board's input on that quick a schedule,
Send, I don't know if it could be an email and you can send links to legislation and then, I don't. You're right, that does kind of, it's not.
I can check with the attorneys. I think if we're just asking for input from board members, they're not taking formal action. I'm not sure we need a meeting or notice.
Yeah. I think if you're just sending out information to share and then just ask, I don't know, that's a good thing to clarify, but sometimes, at the end of the session, I get a text in the morning, here's some amendments, review them quick, right? And so it happens, we need your answer by 2:00 before the hearing. It's that quick. And the
of course, you have lives too, so we would be like, you have to, right? But if we could get that input, and sometimes, sometimes we know in advance, so like some of this could be done, with knowing some of the bills at the end of the year, we'll know some things that'll be, so even preliminary looking at this and be like, this is a good idea, but they haven't thought of this piece, and so as we see this legislation proceed, this may be, an amendment that we want to make, or this sounds really expensive, or a great idea, but how would we, just some of the practicalities, because they're, again, all good intentions at the state legislature, but that's not their expertise either.
Well, that would be, I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, finish.
No, go ahead.
Well, that would be one thing I would be interested in is I'm sure we can dig them up. They're in my emails, probably buried. But to look at what was proposed with those statewide wildfire building codes, especially in the WUI, and then just get some feedback about what was proposed, because I don't think they're going to recreate the wheel, right? Maybe they will, but I don't think so, because they worked so hard on what was being proposed. It just didn't get attached to a bill. And so that was the problem, is whose bill was going to take it. So if we could actually, Eric, I can try to get those to you when I get back, but how we can have you all just review those right off the bat, because legislation and the new legislative session already starting. There's already discussions of bills and legislation and things that they already know is going to happen. And so, we don't know how, this next cycle is going to come and which new players, but there's some legislation like the WE codes that are, the statewide building codes are going to sound like they're going to happen. I have some reservations about it. That's why I'm trying to stay in at that table and have those discussions. So I think it'd be great to have some input on what was suggested, just so I can kind of be prepared going forward. And also I'm on the State Forest Health Council and the legislative subcommittee chairing that. And so there's gonna be discussion in there as well about building codes and things. And so that would also be helpful for having some of this, some of your expertise in my little folder as I have these meetings and give feedback. So I see a lot of value in utilizing and optimizing you all in this role. And I appreciate your willingness to help us and do more. I think it's amazing, and I'm really grateful for that.
And I think that's one of the big issues that we struggle with, and that is that we have a local wildfire. We'll just use wildfire as an example. We have a local code that deals with it, that works for this environment with wind and our conditions. And then you take the good intentions of saying, we're going to make this statewide, and it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily work here. It doesn't necessarily apply. Or there were some good things in here that are not in the state one that, do we have to bring those back and do amendments? So, that's really where a lot of that back and forth goes into play from a very technical standpoint. And I think that we can take a look at that from when we do the bylaws about how do we, because I think it's going to change the role a little bit of us and our time commitments to be able to do this. So it might be something we just lay out there for the expectations. Go ahead, Clint.
Steve.
Oh, Steve.
Steve had some.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, I mean, the Marshall Fire is a perfect example. Unfortunately, it happened. Nobody would have ever expected that. We all talk about it for the Front Range being up in the foothills and things like that. But now, are we going to overreact and have every community build to those standards, and or are there part of the land use code that has to come into new development to help protect ourselves, I'll call it. But anyway, so it is very complex, and I certainly appreciate all your efforts, commissioners, because we can't juggle those kinds of ongoing changes at the last minute and all the things that you have to review. But yeah, let us be a resource. I mean, email's an amazing thing, and people can respond. If they can respond by 2:00, that's great. And if they can't, then we missed the boat. But we'll continue to support you in any best way we can. I think again, Larimer County is such a complex county, with going from foothills to mountains to urban development to wildland area. So it's tough for you guys to have to deal with that, but I think that's where these sub area designs and land use has to be kind of looked at. What's appropriate for LaPorte is not appropriate for foothills in west of Fort Collins or something like that. Not a great example, but I'm just saying it's so diverse. So I'll leave it at that, though.
So one topic I heard, well, two topics I'm hearing more today are wildfire and climate. So we can certainly have a meeting and talk about wildfire. And there's some proposals, for the Board of Commissioners to have a position to maybe get some of the wildfire mitigation. And we can probably have someone come talk about that for one, as well as look at what the statewide code proposal was. And then climate, I didn't bring the climate action plan to this group over last year because we were so busy doing building code. But now that that's out of the way, maybe we can have Heidi Pruis come and talk about where the plan is at right now. We're pretty far along, I think, in terms of having gathered public input and getting internal, and it's going back to the board of commissioners June, I think. So, but at least we could brief the board, the Board of Appeals, on where that plan is at and what it's looking like. And it might be kind of late to get formal input from that. I know some other boards, that climate plan was brought to the Environmental Science Advisory Board to get their input. So that's the kind of thing I was thinking of. When there's a plan being developed that's related to this board, then we could have the board look at it and get commentary.
And I don't think that there's a lot of specifics on that. While I think we've gathered a lot of input, I don't think it's too late to get input because that's going to be done throughout the whole process. And I think it's, I think that we will start going to subject matter experts on some of these, how do we implement that? Or, people had an idea, is that a good idea? Because we heard from, a lot of whom we heard, well, we did have a technical board looking at it, but we also had a lot of public input. I don't think anything's been decided as like, okay, this is the change we need to make. But clearly some of it will be, related to buildings and energy consumption and water consumption. I think water stuff is getting really scary right now. So, and of course, some of it is land use versus building code, right? But I mean, it's.
As you talked to, I was thinking, some of the other projects that we have on the horizon have to do with code related to affordable housing. How do we allow for or make way for more affordable housing projects? And that also relates to our fee structure and our review structure and those sorts of things. And I think there's some connection to what your board could provide in terms of advice on those topics also. And then water is related to that, and some of the fees and those types of things, possibly.
Well, Steve was talking about, I think, Steve, were you the one who brought up about how Habitat tries to, incorporate energy efficiency into affordable projects, and that is doable. And I think that sometimes we hear it's not. And so I know that Housing Catalyst is pretty good about that too. I know the houses that they built on Horsetooth, they've really kept that in mind. So I think we're able to kind of achieve both ends. But how do we best do that? I think that's a conversation that happens a lot, because that's, what you always hear is that, well, it's, you made so many changes to the building code, it's so expensive to build a house, we can't do this, we can't make it energy efficient and affordable, and I mean, can we or can we not? Like, I love to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think it's a very important piece. I think what we all have to recognize is the codes are changing basically on a 3-year cycle, and it's all been incremental. And we've talked about this in our own committee. It might not be, and Clint brings up some points about equipment side. Things might not be affordable now, but there's one manufacturer that can provide a heat pump that looks good, but in 3 years, there's going to be 5, and those kinds of things. So it has to be incremental and small steps. And that's not always what everybody wants to see. Let's just do it all at once, but that's not the answer either. So it's not a one choice selection that's ever the ultimate answer. It's a blend, for instance, of PVs and renewables, which with some gas, with some coal fire, and that's what we're all dealing with, on our Front Range right now with Platte Valley or Platte River. So I do think it's important, but I think, if I was to project out, not to add to your workload or your sleepless nights, but I mean, let's all think forward, because we're always in the moment of solving the problem. So we just adopted the 2021. Technically, in a year, we should be looking forward to the next one at 2024, because it takes that long to get through the cycle of review and see what the changes are. But I mean, even to put the burden on Eric, what issues are the builders out there seeing with the 2021 that we just adopted? Are they all doable? Have they had significant incremental cost increases? There's so many levels of, observation and investigation into, what were the real impacts. But, think forward again, too, that a lot of these things are coming out of commercial architecture and development. What's being done in business and commercial projects and lead projects is not what's being done, at the residential level, but yet our county is probably, from the county's perspective, building permits. I don't know what Eric could tell me, but I'm sure he's got numbers. Is it 90% residential and 10% commercial? So our focus needs to be on the residential, but I do definitely want you to make sure that you consider that the land use perspective of this really needs to overlap with this, because again, Paul mentioned it, but we talked about it, to just go and put that charging station into our building code doesn't make any sense at all. It has to be tied to land use and what's appropriate for those applications. And then you get into the whole utility provider and who can and can't provide it. But we're getting into the mud here, and I'm not trying to do that. So, but I appreciate, again, all your perspective. We're here to help. That's the best way I could put it.
And that gets back to the Board of Appeals didn't want to set policy, that they felt it was its lane, other than recommending building code issues. They felt that anything else, if the county commissioners in particular wanted to have more electric vehicles, then that was appropriate to put in the land use code and say,
And we did it.
right, this kind of use, we want this percentage, et cetera. And then we would come along. I mean, all we put in the building code was that, like, for every new house, you had to have an electric vehicle charging station, circuit, not a station, but I'm thinking about time-wise, if we're
Yeah,
gonna
it's
end
not
by
bad.
9, then we still have to adopt minutes.
Yeah, so I want to be careful of everybody's time here, and I think that we definitely have some good direction from you guys. So if that's good, we'll move on to.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I
Okay.
appreciate your work.
That'll be great. So, okay, so then we'll move on to adopting the minutes. Take a look at January minutes. Is there any discussion related to that one? I think the only thing. That was March's. Okay, I didn't have anything with January, so.
No.
Okay. Any discussion? See anything? Okay, I guess I'll make a motion to approve January minutes. Second?
Second.
Second. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I would have to abstain. I just didn't get to see those minutes, but I was a part of that meeting.
And so 2 yeas, 1 abstained.
Yep, which bylaws just say a majority, once you have a quorum, actions by majority of those present, so 2 of those.
Okay, so then I've done that one. So, all right, so the next one will be the March minutes. And Steve, I know, well, you don't have access to that. They were in a packet that was online there. I think the only thing I had on the March minutes and was that we adjourned twice. I'm at the bottom, it says, so I didn't think that didn't make sense to me.
Oh, I see. It's just, yeah.
So it was only one.
Yep, we only need one of those, okay. So we'll cross that out and then you can decide afterwards.
That was the only thing that I saw.
I missed that, okay.
Any other discussions?
No.
Okay, seeing that, I'll make a motion then to pass the minutes for March 9th meeting. Second.
I'll second.
Second. All right, so then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Again, I don't have those in front of me, so
All
I'll
right.
abstain.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. Okay. And I think that we got direction then for the discussion items heading forward. So technically, my term is done end of this month, but as we discussed, I reapplied, but we haven't had that process, so we don't know where that kind of goes. So I don't know how we want to handle that. If we want to meet next month, we can make that determination here in a couple weeks or pick up in August, being the summer months. And then at that time, we will then vote for office positions.
Okay.
I'm saying Rex, maybe we can just throw that discussion out there for what we have coming up.
I would recommend meeting in July, also because the bylaws say the meeting on or after July 1st, we would choose officers. Presuming that you're reappointed by then or whatever happens. That's up to
Yeah,
you.
we're trying to get that going quickly and,
Yeah.
so your chances are good, but I don't know how soon
Right.
that actually officially gets adopted. And so there was some talk, if we couldn't get that to happen right away, that we would extend a term so that people could meet and still have quorum. And so I don't know where we landed, but we can find out for sure for you. So we really are trying to scramble to get especially boards that are smaller, that quorum is key, so.
And I know on the second Wednesday in August, I'll be on vacation, but maybe we could move our meeting, if it's okay with the board, to the third Wednesday in August, if we don't meet in July.
Okay.
But we
That's
can
fine.
figure it out.
Vacation again, Eric?
Yeah, I know, Steve. By the way, we brought bagels and you didn't show up, so I don't know what's up with that.
Thanks for bagels, Steve, I enjoyed your bagels.
All
Just so
right.
you know, I have to say that every time he tells us he's going on vacation. So I'm not tracking him or anything like that. But Eric, I did have a quick question. How have you been as far as new recruits? Have you gotten some good responses? Do we need to help as a board go solicit some other folks to fill Wayne's position? I think Wayne's is a good one. Structural engineers always have a very practical approach to things and have to know the code, of course.
Yeah, we didn't get any, and I actually, following what the board of county commissioners had recommended, had sent out emails to a bunch of people, engineers that weren't in Fort Collins or women engineers, because it would be nice to have some of that on the board, different perspective, but didn't hear from anybody. So yeah, we could use help. If you know anyone who would be willing, able, good to serve on the board, we need at least 5. I think we only have the 3 continuing, and then Paul's, applying for renomination or whatever, other chair.
Well, I already renominated him, so he's a shoo-in.
So yeah, if you know anybody else, we really could use a structural engineer on the board. That would be good.
So is Rex off as well? I'm sorry.
No, his term continues.
He goes for
Okay.
another year. Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, we can maybe talk about that offline, see if I can help out.
Yeah, some names or whatever it is. So, okay. Well, I guess at that, I'll just make the motion then to adjourn. Second.
I'll second.
Puts on the second today. All right, all in favor, just say aye.
You bet.
Any opposed to adjourning? All right,
No.
all right. Thank you. Appreciate it. So we'll plan on
All
meeting in
right.
July.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks,
everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
See you guys later.
Thank you.
Thanks, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
So Eric, the process would be, we would draft it, it goes through legal, and then it goes to commissioners.
Yeah, we could draft something, and I could already talk to Leo in advance, just tell him what we want to do, get their help with how to write it. And then I think we just need to add a clause under what the authority of the board is. I don't know about adding